Alright, so today I'm going to teach you how to create your first mod for rounds using Unity. I'm going to start with the basic setup process, go over how to adjust various stats on the player, and finally cover how to implement a custom effect. So for this whole guide process, I'll be following along with this guide I wrote a while back. It will be linked in the description. For now, the important thing is that there's a few things you're going to need to download from it to get started. You're going to need to get Unity, the 2018.4.34f. There's a link for it right here. The other two important links in this document are the one for Visual Studio. You don't need Visual Studio, you just need some IDE that can develop or that can compile C#. Visual Studio is just the one I'm most comfortable with, so it's what I'll be using. And then finally, you need to grab this Unity package that you will be importing into Unity to get yourself started. This document's pretty long, so I'll have it open on my second monitor as I go along. Feel free to do the same if you are following along. I might skip around or jump around in it a bit, as it has been a while since I've written this, and there's some things I've learned that might work a little bit better. I haven't gotten around to updating the document yet, but putting all that aside, let's get into the process. So when you first open up Unity, you'll probably get like this little window. If you've never installed Unity before, it might ask you to log in or create an account. If so, you can create an account for free. It's not very difficult. And then if it asks you about monetization, just say that you use Unity in a non-professional capacity. When you finally get to this screen, you're going to want to click the New button. Name your project whatever you want. Leave everything else the same. You can change the location. That's just where it saves. And then create new project. I've already done this as I'm running this in a virtual machine and those run a little bit slowly. So it took a bit for Unity to set up. So I already did it. And then once you get it, you're not going to see all these files yet. You'll just have a single folder that says scenes here. You're going to take the Unity package that you downloaded and just drag and drop it into this little assets window. You need to load it up, a little box will pop up, you'll click import, and then it'll process everything in, and you'll get this whole pile of things. And these are the base assets that you'll need to build a rounds mod, plus some extra stuff that you probably won't need, but was included just to be safe. All right. So to get started, we're going to want to make a new folder to house all of our stuff. So you want to right click inside of that asset screen, go create and then folder. And then I like to put an underscore at the start of the name just to force it to the top. It doesn't really matter what you call this folder. It's just going to hold all of your stuff. So for my case, I'm going to just call it underscore example mod, and you'll build it. And again, if anything's running slow on my computer, it's because I'm not actually running Windows. I have another computer running over top of it. And I'm just doing this because Visual Studio doesn't work in Linux. And I like using Visual Studio, but if you work with Linux, you totally can do it other ways. This is just my preferred method of development. So then the other thing you're going to have is this template card. I'll get back to that actually. So we're going to go in here, and the next thing, we're going to need a few folders in here. The first one we're going to want to create is one called cards. That's where we're going to put our card objects. We're going to want a assets folder. That's where we'll put any other types of assets such as card art and like game effects, things like that. And then finally a folder for your code. You don't strictly need to separate all of this out into separate folders. It just, for me, it helps with organization purposes again. I often work with a lot of stuff in my mods after a while, and so if you start working on bigger projects, you'll want to break things out in a way that makes sense for you. So anyways, inside of where we're putting our code, we're going to want to create an assembly definition. So that's again, right click, create, and then assembly definition. And so this is what's going to tell Unity to create a file specifically for your mod that will compile and be able to load into rounds. So we're going to call this, for me again, I'm just going to call it example mod. And then once it creates it, again, it lags a bit on my computer. You'll get this little box on the side for its settings. So what we're going to want to do is you're going to want to check the override references button, and that'll pop up this extra assembly references tab. So yeah, this is because I clicked out of it. Hold on a second. Okay. So yeah, so then this first, this assembly definition references tab, you're gonna click plus, and we're going to select unbound lib, and then add another one, and add modules. And what this is doing is it's telling Unity which other libraries you want your mod to depend on. And so in this case, these are just your basic modding ones. Unbound lib is the library that basically allows us to mod rounds, and modding utils is just a really helpful utility library. And then the other things we need from this list, this assembly references list, we're gonna want Harmony, Harmony DLL. We're going to want BepInEx. And so BepInEx and Harmony, those are the two programs that let you inject code into rounds. You don't really need to know too much about them. It's just important to know that you need them. And then finally, assembly C#.dll. This is the code of rounds itself. And so in order to work with rounds, you need its source code. So once that is all set up, you can just click the apply button, and it'll take a second, and then it'll be good to go. Okay. So now we want to create a couple of scripts. So we're going to create the entry point for our mod. And so for that, I like to just call it either main or plugin. So in this case, I will just call it again. So this is basically just the entry point for our mod. It's where all of the setup code is going to exist. And if I just right click, if you right click, you can go to open C# project. You can also go assets and open C# project. And this should open it in your editor of choice. If you haven't, if you haven't had Unity set up before, you might not have it set to open Visual Studio. If that is the case, you're going to want to go to Edit, Preferences, and then under External Tools, External Script Editor, you want to select Visual Studio. And that'll just tell it to open inside of Visual Studio. I already had this set up, so it just did it for me. And so that'll open up our project inside of Visual Studio. And if you see, we have this example mod. And if we open up the folders, we have plugin.c#. Now, what I'm going to do is there's actually some code that I have just in that document right here. So I'm just going to copy all of this, and I'm going to paste it. Just going to select all of this and paste it over top. I guess I'm not going to do that. Yeah, why is it? Okay. It seems that it has held whatever was on my previous clipboard from just inside of the web document isn't inside the virtual machine, so I'm gonna type this out by hand. Actually, I'm just gonna undo a bunch of this, and then I will. Okay. So you should be able to just copy this code from here into there. I have made my life more difficult, so right. Shared clipboard should be enabled. Yeah. All right. We'll do it the hard way. I mean, that's fine. So rather than copying this, the other thing you can do is we just got to change mono behavior to base Unity plugin. And if that doesn't automatically tell it to use BepInEx, you have to add using BepInEx to the top of your file. We don't need any of those for now. And we want to just add several annotations to the top of this class. We're going to want to use BepIn process, and that's going to tell it what application it's targeting. So in our case, because we're building this for rounds, we type in rounds.exe. That just ensures that it doesn't accidentally get loaded into a different game if the file is added to a different game. It shouldn't actually matter, but just because we're making it for rounds, you put this line in just to tell BepInEx, hey, this was designed for rounds. And then we want above that BepIn plugin. And for now, I'm just going to leave this like it is, but you're going to be passing it 3 different strings. And I will explain what those are in a minute. But finally, we're going to want a few more BepIn, or a few BepIn dependencies. And this is telling BepInEx, which is again the mod loader, which mods need to be there in order for our mod to work. And so we're going to start with com.willis.round.unbound. And so this is the GUID for the identification string for unbound lib. The other one that's really important to add is BepIn dependency pykes.rounds.plug. Oh, these are outside of the quotes. My mistake. And it would also help if I was looking at what I was typing. Plugin. Dot. I would not recommend typing these by hand like I'm doing, by the way. It's a very good recipe for messing things up, and if something breaks later on when I'm testing this, that'll probably be why. And now for the final one, you want hard choice spawn unique hard. I have probably misspelled something in there. Oh well. What this is it's a plugin that makes the pick phase of the game work a bit better, and it's not strictly necessary that you depend on it, but most card mods should do it anyways, just because when you start getting into modded cards, it increases the chance that the card pick phase breaks and without this patch in there. And so it's a good idea just to make sure that yours depends on it. It's just like as a good rule of thumb, make sure that this is here. If it isn't though, there's nothing inherently wrong that will happen, but again, I highly recommend it. So anyways, let's go over this BepIn plugin. So there's a few things that would go in here. The first one is your mod ID. That would be this, one of these like long strings. Generally, they're in the form of like reverse URL. Like in this case, it's like com.willis, sort of like willis.com. It doesn't really matter what you put there, as you can see. It just needs to be some unique string that doesn't have spaces in it to identify your mod. So like for me, I'm just gonna go root.example.mod. The second string is the mod name. That's going to be the English readable version that gets printed out to the log. So for my case, I'm just gonna write simple mod. This second string does not have to be unique, and you can change it between uploads. This version, or this string right here, the first one, once you make it and upload your mod, you want to keep it the same because it's the string that will allow other things to identify your mod by. The final string is a version number. It's in the form of major version, minor version, patch number. So like 0.0.0. Basically, you would use the first that last digit for if you make a very tiny like bug fix type change. The second number is generally for minor updates to the mod, and then the third number is for major updates to the mod. It doesn't really matter how you use them though. The important part is just that every time you upload a new version of your mod, the version number has to increase. That's the biggest thing to keep in mind. Make sure the version number changes every single time and you always make it go up. Now, for example, like you could have this be at like version 0.99 and then you could change it to version 1.0 and that has increased because it's bigger number to the left. It doesn't matter like how you increase it, just make sure that it does increase with every version change. All right, so the other thing that we're gonna need is a sorry. We're gonna want a string for the mod initials. String mod. And so this is the initials of the little text that gets shown in the bottom of some cards. So for here, I'm just going to go EX for EXM for like example mod. It doesn't really matter what you use there. I actually don't even like use this in my personal mods, but a lot of mods use it. It's good to have it at least in case you decide to want to use it. And then we'll just declare an awake and a start function. For now, we will do nothing with them, but we will be using them later, so we're just going to declare them here. All right. Now then, we will come back to the script later, now that we have it just the initial setup. I'm going to tab back over to Unity, and I'm going to go over just getting a card set up. So back out in this root directory, we have the template card. And so this ships as part of the package. We're going to want to make a copy of it by pressing Control D. That duplicates it, and we'll drag that copy we made over to our cards folder. And then now we have a copy here. And I'm just gonna leave it as template card. You could, if you're just making one mod, just drag the original one in here. I like to leave the old one here for if you decide to make a second mod in the same project file, you can just keep reduplicating it in. But you could just click and drag it just right in there just fine. It all works. And so now we can duplicate it out of here. So we're going to make a copy of this, and we're going to rename it to first card. And you can call this whatever you want, but it's going to be, I'm calling it first card because it's the first card we're going to make. So on the right-hand side, you get the little inspector tab, and I'll just drag this out a bit. This is all of the information for that card. These first two things, the rarity adder and the theme adder, you can ignore those, or even straight remove them. They are for if you are working with RarityLib and ThemeLib to do custom rarities, which I'm not going to go over in this tutorial, but if you want in a later tutorial, I might. They start disabled because if you're not using them, you can just leave them disabled and they won't do anything and they won't have any actual negative impact. But if you know you're not going to use them ever, you can just right click and go remove component, and that just gets rid of them. So the first script that's actually important is the card info script. This is the script that contains all of the visual information for the card. The first piece of information of note is the card name. This is the name that appears on the top of the card. So I'm going to call it, where did my mouse go? My. And now this actually isn't case sensitive at all. Rounds will automatically take this string and make it fully capitalized. I just like to case things the way I would want them to be, just because it makes it easier to read inside the editor. Your card description, that's the little bit of text that appears directly above the stats, like right underneath the art. Example description. Then we have the card stats. This is your like red and green numbers that get affected. It starts at 0. If you change the size is how many of them you want. So we're going to go 2, and then it'll add these little elements, and you can open them up. The positive checkbox, you check if you want the stat to be a good stat, that means it's green, and if it's unchecked, then the stat will be red, and that's the amount number that gets changed. So we'll make one, green, and so we're going to go. Actually, we'll come back to adding these stats later. I'm just going to quickly go over what they are, because I want to adjust what the card does and then come back and make them reflect it. So the amount would be a number that you'd write there. So you could do like plus 50%, for example, or plus 2 or minus 7, or whatever it is you're adjusting. This is the amount it's being adjusted by. And stat is the stat that's being adjusted. Simple amount is this little drop down of a bunch of different options, and these get shown to players when they don't have the show card stat numbers setting enabled inside of their game, which is off by default. If you have it not set to not assigned, that means it will always show the value in amount. And honestly, you probably just want to leave it as not assigned and tell the player exactly what you're doing. But if you want to use the simple amount, that's how you would do it. So we're just going to make that small for now. For rarity, that's just the rarity in the game. You got common, which is the black corners, uncommon, which is the blue corners, and rare is your pink corners. Obviously, the rarer it is, the harder to find. For now, we're just going to leave this at common. Card art is complicated, and we'll come back to it. Sprite and color are both things you don't have to worry about. Categories and blacklisted categories is a system that the game almost never uses, and it's also a little bit complicated. You don't really need to worry about it. It lets you tell a card that it has these certain qualities, or you can use blacklisted categories to say, if you have this card, you can no longer get any cards with those categories. If I just real quick set this to 1, just so I can open up the categories that might have. In the base game, there are only 3: bounces, arch modifiers, and range dependent. And bounces are used by any bounce cards. Range dependent, I believe, is just homing and remote. And I don't know if anything uses arch modifiers off the top of my head. But then I know that Buckshot specifically blacklists these 2 categories. Very few cards use this. It's not really something that most modders use either, so it's pretty safe to ignore. Allow multiple, on the other hand, is pretty important. This tells you whether or not you're allowed to have multiple copies of the card for a single player. By default, it's turned off. This is only the case for Phoenix. All other cards in the base game, it would be turned on. So if you want the player to be able to have multiple copies of your card, you just click this little checkbox. The card base can be safely ignored. It processes the visuals for how the card renders out. It is a it's more complicated than card art, and I probably won't go over how to do it ever. But if there is enough demand, I could go over custom card bases. Finally, you have the color theme. These are the various different like outlines and named colors in the cards, like destructive red, firepower yellow, defensive blue, all of those. These would be like, big bullet is red, fast forward is a yellow card, tank is a blue card, you know, that nature of things. So this lets you choose what color your card is. For this example, let's make it pink. Finally, you get to how to adjust stats on the player. You have 3 scripts. You got character stat modifiers, gun, and block. The apply card stats and photon view scripts you don't want to touch. They're just necessary to make the card work. So in order to, there's a lot of stats here. And so in the document, let me get that back on my screen. I've broken down what these stats are. A lot of them they're highlighted in red, meaning that adjusting them doesn't do anything. I'm not going over what all of these do inside of this video. It would take way too long and mostly waste time. So if you want to know like specific stats, this is where you're going to want to refer to it on in the document. It'll be again pinned in the description. But like for this example, let's make a card that here. Let's pull up the stats again. Let's make a card that gives you plus 50%. Damage. And the negative downside of plus plus 0.5 seconds of block cooldown. All right, so to do that, the damage one is inside of the gun stat. I'm going to open that up, and we're going to go to multiply damage. So the way that works is when you take the card, it will multiply the player's damage by that amount. And so if we want to increase it by 50%, we change it from 1 to 1.5. And then for block, we go down to the cooldown add, and we add 0.5 to add the half second of block cooldown. And that's it for getting the card set up, minus one specific thing. We have to add it to an asset bundle. So down here where there's asset labels, you get the asset bundle, and you want to click new and then give it a name. So in my case, we're going to call it example assets. And then it gets saved there. And then, oh shit, I had this open the whole time, didn't I? Okay, I'm going to just close that down and I'll quickly show you what I did. So inside a gun, right here is the damage stat, and here's where I set it to 1.5. And then inside of block, I set the cooldown add to 1.5. And then down here is where it says asset labels. And asset bundle, I clicked here, I clicked new, and I created a new asset bundle called example assets. Okay, so what we need to do then is actually tell Unity that it wants to put this asset bundle into this file. So to do that, we're going to go back over to Visual Studio, and we're going to open the editor script. So assembly C# -editor, assets editor, CS proj post processor. And that'll be this script. There's a lot of code here. The only thing you actually care about is this dictionary right here. You're going to put your mod name here, the name that you named the assembly definition. So in my case, it is example mod, and this is case sensitive. And then the other line is what you named your asset bundle. So in my case, it's example assets. Asset bundles will always be fully lowercased, so just keep that in mind. And then you can just save that. And so now, what we should be able to do is assets build asset bundle, and that should create the file. And it'll take a little bit. But then, yeah, it does that, and that'll create and reload the script. It should create a little file that holds your actual card inside of it. I actually did this a little bit preemptively, but that's okay. Ideally, you only want to be doing this like right before you build your mod, because it does take a little bit of time to do, and then it takes even longer on my computer. So if I remember to edit this video before uploading it, I will skip forward. Who knows if I'm going to remember to do that, though. I have never done something like this before. Okay. Anyways, because I forgot there was a second thing we wanted to make. We want to make a script to... We need to create an object that holds all of our cards. That way we're not having to manually load them each in via code if we make a bunch of them. So we're going to make a script, and we're going to call it card holder. And this script will be, well, it'll do just that. It'll hold the cards that we make so that they can be registered. So we're gonna open this in Visual Studio, which I have over here. Right. Hold on. One of the weird things is, for some reason, it doesn't always update. This is not something that normally happens. I've just got something weird with my install, and I haven't gotten around to fixing it. Normally, Visual Studio should detect that something's changed. But since it hasn't, I just have to reload it manually. There we go. And so now you can see that there's that example assets inside the asset bundle. And here's the card holder script. Right. So what we're going to want to do is add a couple of lists. Public list card info cards. And then, oops, public list card info hidden cards. Now, hidden cards, we're not going to really need those here, but if you are doing something complicated where you need to give the player special cards that are used for backend logic, you'll need this. I don't use them very often. I'm not gonna go over like making one right now, but they're basically the same thing. if you come up with a use case for it in your mod, I'm gonna show you how to build them like inside of code, just in case you end up needing one. But none of the examples I'm going to go over today will need it, but it's good to have the ability to build them. So I'm going to remove these two functions. We don't need those. And instead, we're going to make internal void register cards. So this function is going to be called at the start of our mod to just register all of our cards with Unbound. So first we're going to iterate over all of the cards in inside the cards array. So we're going to go for each of our cards and cards. And we're going to go custom. Oh, right. We want to include Unbound using Unbound lib. I think Unbound lib dot cards. There we go. So we're going to go custom card dot register unity card and then we go yes, plug in dot initials. This is where the mod initials are. I forgot that that's actually how this works. Yeah, so this function takes your mod initials, and that's what this is used for. Besides just showing little letters in the corner of the screen, is it's also used for categorizing it into a group. And so we're going to put that in, and then we're going to go for the object name. Or for the card name, we want to go card dot game object dot hold on. So card dot, this is supposed to be card dot game because this is the game object, and then this is the card's name. So card dot card name, and then true to tell it that it's enabled, and then null because we don't need a callback. Okay, so we go over how this function works now that I've written everything out. So it takes, I'm just gonna drill into it real quick so I can explain it better. It takes a game object, which is just the card object itself, the mod initials to figure out where to put it, the name of the card, whether or not we want the card to exist. This would be set to false for hidden cards. Basically, that just hides it from existing inside of Unbound, and you have to register it elsewhere. And then the callback action is if you need something special to happen at the moment the card is created. I've never needed this, but if you come up with a use case for it, there are a few use cases for it. Yeah, I think I've used it a couple of times, but for the most part, you don't need this, and so that's why here it's set to null. So we're passing in the game object, the mod's initials, which we put here, and then the card's name, and then build it, and then we don't care about a callback. Now for hidden cards, we're going to do something very similar. So I'm actually going to just copy this because there's only a couple of changes. First, we set enabled to false. Again, this will hide it from the toggle card menu, and it will make it not show up in the pick phase. And then we have to tell modding utils about it so that it can actually be given to people. We go modding utils.utils.cards. Instance, nope, not inactive. Instance dot add hidden card, and we go card. And so that'll just take the card and tell botting utils that this card exists, And that way, later on in your code, if you're ever using an add card to player function to give a player this card you've created, it is capable of doing that. Again, that is outside of the scope of what I'll be going over, but if you come up with a use case for it, now you have the way to build it. So now that we have that script set up, we're going to want to quickly tab back into Unity, and we're going to go to Assets. I'm going to make a new game object here, a new prefab here. And so to make your own prefab, you can't just go like right click and create prefab. There's no option for that here that I know of. So instead, what you do is you come up to this scene hierarchy and you just create a new empty game object. You rename it. So I'm going to call it mod cards. And it's just basically our card holder object. And then I'm going to click it and I'm going to drag it down to assets. And that turns it into a prefab. And now that we have it as a prefab asset, we can go and add component on card holder. And we're going to grab our card holder script. And so now you can see there's that list of hidden cards and cards. And we're also going to take this and we're going to put it inside of our example assets. And now to get our card to actually build, we're going to take this first card and we're just going to click and we're going to drag it into cards. And there it goes. It shows up there. Cool. So we're almost done with getting a card into the game. Again, this is much easier going forward with like future cards. The first setup is a little bit slow. All we're going to do is we're going to go back to our plugin script inside of card holder, and we want to add a couple of lines. The first one is we want to go internal static asset bundle assets. And we want to declare this inside, we want to set this inside of our await function. So we're going to go assets equals jotun.utils.load asset bundle. And this is where we're going to put in our asset bundle name. So that would be example assets for me. And then where it's being held. So for that would be, we're going to go type of parentheses plugin. So that's just getting the underlying type for our plugin and then dot assembly. So what this little bit of text here is doing is just telling the game to grab our, this is the wrong function, but telling the game to grab our asset bundle. This should have been load asset utils dot load asset bundle from resources. Sorry, that's the command. And so what that'll do is it takes this file, it grabs the assembly file that it compiles down into, and grabs this asset bundle and loads it into the game. Now inside of our start function, what we can do is go asset dot load asset type of game object. And we're just going to go mod cards, which is, if you'll recall, the name of our little prefab, our little card holder object. And then we're going to go and we're going to get the card holder component off of it. So we're going to get component card holder. And then we're going to call the register cards function. So this then will take all of the cards we've given to it and register them into the game. So from this point, all we have to do is remember to actually rebuild the asset bundle because we've made changes to it, compile the mod, and we should be able to get it into the game and see that first card. So I'm going to rebuild the asset bundles and rebuild the mod, and then I'll show you loading into the. Now hopefully you already know how to import mods. If you don't, that's fine. But let's see. So yeah, that should have done that. Just want to verify that it's not still trying to do things. Yeah, it's still working. I should have logged out of Steam before doing this. Oh well. Yeah, so you can you can see that it's still working because it's got the little working animation. And there you go, pops back up. It takes a little bit to build asset bundles. That's why I like to make sure I only do it right before I build the mod. Just in case I decide I have to make more changes before going and compiling. My computer's rather old. If you have a newer computer, it will work a bit faster than this. There we go. Okay. So now that it's done working, we can go over here and we can right click on our example mod and we can click build. And if we tab over to the output, it starts building it and it dumps it down. And if you look right here, that's where it'll build it. That's where you want to check to see where the DLL file is. That DLL file is your mod. So if we go into your mod viewer of choice, I have Gale. Mine looks really ugly because I've skinned it to look this way. Most people use Thunderstore. Uh, it doesn't really matter what you use. Like the process for importing a mod might be a bit different depending on what version you're using. But I will have the modding dev like get Discord server linked in the description as well, and they have an example of how to do it inside of Thunderstore, as does the tutorial documentation that I'll have linked in the description. But for Gale, you go import local mod, and then we have to navigate to where we saved, or where it saved our mod file. So the bin debug, and then there's the mod. And so we import it. And in theory, if everything worked, we can boot up rounds. Now this profile is just my default mod testing profile. I will have a profile code linked for that in the description as well. All right, Unity Explorer is just a lovely tool that I'll probably go over at some point. But this basically is just a tool I use for mod development that it lets you look at what's going on inside the game, and it can be really useful for figuring out why things aren't working. So if we go to the toggle cards menu, it didn't load, which means I've done something wrong. So let's figure out what I did wrong. Let's go file, open game log. Did it even import? Ah, right. Remember how I said I probably misspelled it? Yep, I misspelled it. I misspelled a few things. So rather than figure out how to spell things correctly, I'm gonna do something you really should not do. I'm just gonna delete these lines. I don't feel like figuring out what the actual IDs are, mostly because copying and pasting into this isn't working. Actually, I have my other development environment over here. I can just grab them out of here. This is a big mess of code. This is why I organize things. I have a lot of files in my main environment. So I can just paste those there. And there we go. So we'll rebuild. And then you'll notice that because I didn't change anything in the asset bundle, I don't have to rebuild the asset bundle. So that's one of the nice things. You only have to build that when you make changes directly to it. So then we're going to re-import the mod. And now that we've recompiled it. And we should now be able to go mods, toggle cards. And there's still something wrong. That sounds like me. Let's see what I did wrong this time. Null reference exception. This is why having a script is useful, and something I did not do. Ideally, I would have had all of this already coded, and so we wouldn't run into issues like this, but I spelled the asset bundle name wrong. Yeah, spelling is not my strong suit. So we're gonna build this a third time. And you know what they say, third time's the charm. Hopefully. At least the game doesn't take that long to boot. There we go. Okay, so it turns out when you spell things correctly, the card, the things work. And so here's the card, and you can see, example description. That I've also butchered the spelling of description. Don't worry about that. And so let's go test that it shows up in the game. Let's go into sandbox. And a nice trick is if you type slash and then F, it'll bring you over to this lovely map that is a lot easier for testing. So we're gonna go my first card, and there it is. And you can see it's pink like we told it to be. And if I take it, I can then, well, so the block does feel slower, and I can like test it like doing damage. You can see it does a lot more damage. But also a nice thing you can do is if I have with Unity Explorer, I can just go grab the player and I can look at their block component and I can scroll down to their cooldown ad. You can see there it is, it's set to 0.5, like, we increased it by 0.5. And so if I was to take a second copy of it, I can open that back up and update the values, and so now you can see it's gone up to 1. And similarly, if I grab the gun script, you can see that the player's damage is now up to 2.25 because it's been increased by 50% and then 50% again. If I was to take a third copy, that's how math works, it's now up to a little over 3 1/3. So we can see card is in there, it's working properly, and that's great. So you might go, okay, but what if we want something a bit fancier than just playing around with the base stats? Well, let's go over the basics of how you could do that. So I'm gonna start by creating a new script. Actually, we can do this inside of here too. Let's go and create a new script. New item. And we're just gonna call this example. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create some code that makes the player, or that makes all players take, I don't know, like 30 damage at the start of the round. That sounds like fun. So we're gonna go public class, and then this needs to be a mono behavior. So I should not have made that have a space in its name. Hold on. Spaces in names are not great. There we go. And the reason I usually build them inside of Unity and then pull them inside of Visual Studio is because it does the initial setup of making it a mono. I'm setting up some of the usings and making a mono behavior for me. Unity engine, and you want it to extend. And I heavily use the suggestions simply because, again, spelling, I'm terrible at it. So having the program go, hey, is this what you're trying to type? That helps me avoid making mistakes. That's one of the reasons why I put up with virtual machines being slow so that I can have access to Visual Studio. Okay. So we're gonna want a few things. So the first one we're gonna do is we're just gonna make we're gonna make a start function. No. We're gonna make a trigger function. So we're gonna go public void trigger. And so this is what we want to happen, what we want the effect to actually do. So like I said, we're gonna have this deal 50 damage to all players. No, I said 30. Let's do 30. 30 seems more reasonable. So we're gonna go we're gonna have to get all the players, so we're gonna make a for each loop. Oops. I was holding down my shift for too long. So we're gonna go player manager dot instance dot players. So this is the array of all of the players. And we're just gonna go dot for each, and that'll just build me out a for each loop. So for each player in players, I'm gonna go player dot data dot health handler dot take. Oh, that's not health. We want dot health handler dot take damage. Now this takes a lot of parameters. So actually, there's a better way to do this. Because we want to know who the player who owns this. So we're gonna start with. Sorry, I coded a bit of a circular process sometimes. We're gonna want a player owner. And so this will be the player that the script is on. And so if we go public void start, we can go owner equals get component in parent. Get component in parent. There we go. And so let's just grab the player that it's on and stores it. So the first thing we want to do is go if parentheses owner dot data dot view dot is right. So we're going to want to make this networked just to make sure that it doesn't happen on multiple people's screens. And so to do that, I was trying to access the player's view, but if you notice, it says that I need Photon Unity networking. And so this might be an error you see sometimes if you're trying to access something that it doesn't know what it is. So to do that, we want to go back into Unity. And we want to go over to the example mod. Yeah, it's yelling at me because I didn't put a semicolon in there. We can fix that in a minute. And we want to click this, and we want to grab the thing it was saying we needed, which was Photon Unity Networking. And then we just click apply. And Now if I just reload the file, which it should be doing automatically, and I don't know why it isn't, but it's not hard to just reload it. There we go. Now I go owner.data.view dot is my, and so now it'll only run the code if it's the person's computer, and now the person who owns the script's computer. And now in order to make it actually go to all players, we go call take damage. This is a network function that will make sure that the damage is synchronized. Doing it like this isn't strictly necessary for like what we're doing. It's just a good practice, so I like to do it even when it's not strictly important. And now the other thing I'm gonna want is a damage value, which public int damage equals 30. Cool. So now, so damage is always in the form of a vector, which is a two-dimensional pointer that it has a direction. If you're just doing generic damage like this, it doesn't really matter what direction it's going in. So I like to use the downward direction. So I'll just do vector2 dot down and then multiply it by our damage. And then it also takes a position. So we're just gonna pass in the owner dot transform dot position. So that's just a position where the damage is originating from. And then it takes several other things. The important one that we want is to set the damaging player to the owner, because they're the one doing the damage. And those are the only variables you actually need for this. If you're interested in what the other ones do, you can open up the function and take a look at it. It does some stuff, and then it calls this send take damage, which does a bit more logic, and then finally calls take damage. And so like you can go through all the code and see like exactly how all of that works. But this is the important one. So now we have this code set up to do that. But it doesn't actually do anything right now. We need to tell the game when we want it to do this. So the other thing we want to do in start is go game mode manager dot add hook, and the hook we want to be game mode hooks dot battle start. So that's once the players are allowed to start fighting. And then we want to go I want to type this little sequence. And what this is a little lambda right, it needs to be an enumerator. So hooks need to be enumerators. So what we want to do for that is we want to change this from void to I enumerator. And then just at the very bottom of it, we just go yield break. And so this will run all of the code. Enumerators are kind of like threads, but slightly different. Basically, it lets you start running code and then yield control back to the main thread and then continue on. That's not really important for what we're doing, so we'll just run all of it, and then you just add yield break to indicate that you have finished running your enumerator and you can go back to what you were doing. And this little underscore is because hooks will generally get past the game mode manager or the handler, but we don't care about that for our purposes, so we just put that underscore there to say we don't care about this, just run this function. And so then the final thing we want to do is we want to clean this hook up once the player gets reset and this card, or if this card gets removed ever. So we're gonna add a public void on destroy, and the spelling of that is very important, but I know it's spelled right because it says Unity message on it. This is one of the many Unity messages are various different things that the Unity system will send to components to make them work. Start is when it's created, and destroy is when it's destroyed. And so all we need to do is go to clean up what we've done. We want to go game mode manager dot remove hook, and then we just want to copy the same thing we created it with. And there you go. So that's the code side of things. And now back in Unity, we want to make a second card to do this. So that would be over here. We'll duplicate our template card. And then we're gonna okay, that's not a real error. Okay. That was the old error. Just rename this to second card. And again, you should probably give these better names than what I'm naming them, but this is just a tutorial. Second card. And this is just going to be a description of deals, deal. And for this one, let's leave it as destructive red. That seems like a pretty good color for this effect. It doesn't really need any stats. The only thing it's going to need is the object that holds that script. So we're gonna have to go create that first. Let's create a new object, and we're gonna call this a underscore second card. Now the reason I'm naming it this is a naming schema that the game uses. The A indicates that it's an effect being applied to the player, or being added to the player, specifically. And then second card is telling it that that's the card that it's coming from. You can name this whatever you want, whatever will make the most sense to you, though. All that's important is we want to add this, the script we wrote. So, effect, what did I call it? Yeah, example effect. It's going to want to add that to it. Hold on. Did I? Oh, I didn't make it public. Okay, that makes sense. If I, just real quick, make this public, what that lets me do is then I can also, in theory, oh, it's loading. Tiny little loading thing. In theory, that would let you, yeah, there you go. You can now set the damage directly inside of Unity if you prefer doing that inside of the editor rather than inside of code. But either way, we now have this prefab. We go to our cards, we grab our second card, and we want to put it in this add object to players script. So we're just going to click it and we're going to drag it to right there. And so now when the player takes the card, they will get that object put on it and it'll run its code. So we should be good to build assets. Wait for Unity to do its thing. Is it? It's not. You can tell it's not because it's not responding. Yeah, it's always two windows, and now we should be done. Theoretically. Still not responding. There's a third window. I guess it's not always two windows. I'm usually multitasking when I make mods, so I'm not usually looking at this. And also, I don't end up having to rebuild assets that often. I usually will do like a bunch of things, and then just build it right when I'm done, ready to test. And anything that isn't working will probably be code side, anyways. So I don't actually have to build new asset bundles all that often. But now that it's built, we can rebuild the mod. Wait for it to build, and then we can re-import the mod. And then it didn't load. You know why it didn't load? It didn't load because I forgot to actually tell the game it existed. I forgot the important step of adding it to the card array, and you know, that's on me. Put it there, and we rebuild the asset bundles. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to edit this shit out. And I'm almost certainly going to forget that I need to edit this shit out, and I apologize greatly to the viewers who will get to watch this build process. But you know, I guess it lets you see how why it sometimes takes me forever to get my mods updated. Because I'll do this and then I'll like get distracted. Like, I mean, you've seen how many times I've spaced out trying to do things. Um, you know, it's all part of the process. It's all part of the process. But yeah, no, it's like you're gonna make mistakes. That's just how this works. There's a lot of really basic mistakes that I make all the time, and I never learn to stop making them. Many times things don't work because I forgot to re-import the mod, and I will spend. God, I spent days of my life just hunting down bugs that don't exist because of failed imports. Okay. So now we rebuild it, and this should be the last time we're rebuilding it. Hopefully. Go back over to the mod manager, import the mod, and launch the game. Okay, so now I should be able to look at my cards. And there it is. There's the second card. Cool. So now this one I can't test in Sandbox. So what I'm going to do is have to test it in local play, and in order to do that, you'll need a controller. But for now, I'm just going to turn off all the vanilla cards to ensure that it shows up. And then I should be able to go local versus and hope that my controller works. Yep, there we go. We'll just join them in, and then sure. Oh, I have to press start to ready up. There we go. And so we just take the second card, and all of these null cards, those are stemming from that card choice mod that makes sure that otherwise it would soft lock when it got here because there's only two cards in the game. Because I disabled all the vanilla ones. So we're just going to take just a blank card, because all that matters is that we take 30 damage. And see, there we go. We both took 30 damage. And just to prove that it works every round, yep, we do it again. And so you can see the way that works is if I open up the Explorer and we go grab the first player, you can see here's that A second card, and there's our example effect on it. And just real quick, I'm gonna kill the player that has it twice, just so you can see that it does, you can get multiple copies of it. Well, actually you can't get multiple copies of it because you see that this one I didn't set to allow multiple falls. But if I take this card, they both say my as the first words, and I kill myself twice, you can see that that one does show up a second time because I've said that you can get that one multiple times. Finally, just to demonstrate, I will take the blue player out twice, and I'll show what happens if we both have the card. Which in this case, you should then see us take a lot more damage because now we're taking 60 damage turn. And yeah, that's all there is to it. Now, if you wanted to, I'm going to quickly show you how you would make that only deal damage to opponents. I'm not going to rebuild it to demonstrate, but what you could do is if we go back in here, we can go to our example effect. And just before we call take damage, what we can go is if parentheses player.data.t stats dot no, it's just player. Sorry. Player.teamID exclamation point equals owner.teamID. And this will make it only do damage to your opponents. And that could be useful to make the card more powerful if you think dealing damage to everyone is too weak. But that's basically all of it. I mean, there's a lot you can do with this game. There's a lot of code. I would highly recommend just sort of digging through the game's code base in like a decompiled version of the code, looking at other people's mods for examples of how to do things, and of course any other effects. Like if you're trying to do something complicated, feel free to ask in the modding dev help channel of the server that I'll have linked in the description, or even in the comments of this video. I don't know how often I'll check them, but I will definitely try to help with any issues that you might have. All right, yeah, and if there's other things you want me to go over in the future, let me know, and I might try to get around to making more videos. No promises on that, but you know, we'll see. If there's enough demand, I'll definitely do it. Yeah. All right, that's it. Have a nice day. Good luck modding out there.